Welcome. It is lovely to see you all. I first of all just apologize for the change in link at the last minute. Don't know why it happened. Something happened. Had to change the link. Glad you made it. My name is Tom Griffin. I am with the Ted Rogers School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, and I'm also the Assistant Director at the Institute for Hospitality and Tourism Research. This is a presentation, a part of the Main Street Reimagined project, which I've just briefly introduced. So today's session, of course, is about creating Main Street experiences and mitigating risks. We do have Martin's going to be giving us a presentation. It'll be a great chance to ask questions and have a discussion. But before we get into that, just like to acknowledge the land that Ryerson University, which is going through a name change, of course, is situated. So Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So this is a project housed within the Institute for Hospitality and Tourism Research, and just briefly, we're a group closely connected to the School of Hospitality and Tourism, and we aim to do research that is both useful for academic purposes, but also has practical implications for the businesses and industries that we are associated with. And we're keen to find our students' experience and connections as well. So if you would like to stay connected with us, there's our website, hdmresearch.ca. It'd be great to have you follow along. And then, so as part of the Institute for Hospitality and Tourism Research, this particular project about Main Street Reimagined is a project that's been going on. We've kind of released it since September last year, but we've been doing research for a year and a half or so before then. And so, we are tourism people looking to find information and apply ideas to Main Street for business improvement areas and that community. And so I'll drop these links in the chat once Martin starts talking, but we do have lots of PDFs to download, including one written by Martin connected to today's topic. And we do have all of the recordings of our previous sessions as well. We will have our next session on Monday, February 14th in 2 weeks, which is going to be connected to customer service and the experience and the level of service that a community can offer a visitor and why that's important, and some ideas on how to improve that. With that said, I'm actually going to pass it over to my colleague, Walter. And Walter, I'll let you introduce Martin.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Again, on my behalf, welcome to everyone. We're now chugging ahead. We're looking at having sessions about every 2 weeks for the next month or so. And today is really important because this is the first time that we've actually had a session that's completely done by people outside of our institute, but a practitioner. And you'll be seeing that we'll be having several sessions coming up where practitioners will be sharing their views and ideas with you. This was always in the spirit of developing the handbook, that it's something that we saw being co-created between people involved in Main Streets and economic development in other areas. By the end of May, we'll have gone through all of these webinars, and we'll then be putting this together in an ebook, which will, of course, make you aware, and it'll be enhanced by the comments we've received from people who have been part of our webinars. And so we look forward to hearing from you. I got to know Martin when I was assisting on a project being done by the Culinary Alliance, and he was one of the people involved in the team. And I was really impressed with the kind of approach that he took to understanding communities and business and economic development. And this is based on 20 years of experience that he's had dealing with the tourism, arts, and business sectors. And I could see right away that he really understood both the conceptual, but also the realities of making change happen at the local level. Martin is bilingual, and he's able to bring then an understanding not only from the English speaking parts of the country, but it has given us insights into what is going on in Quebec and other Francophone areas in the country, which has really been very useful. He's involved in communications and marketing. He's involved with financial administration and governance. And he looks at it from the point of view of business and the communities and regions. And so he does bring together a wide range of perspectives as he carries on his work. I was always impressed with his out-of-the-box thinking. Whenever we were looking at coming up with innovation or change, Martin often could come up with what I thought were really useful, practical strategies to deal with particular issues, and always based on this perspective of a business and what it really meant to really means to achieve the kind of successes that we're looking for. He's led several different projects in culinary, culture, leisure, destination management, and developing campaigns. He's very much interested in public and private partnerships, and he's done these in Saskatoon, the townships, eastern townships, Ottawa, and across the country. So we're really happy to have Martin with us today, and we thank him for how seriously he's taken this task and sharing his thoughts with us, bringing, I think, a unique perspective to how do we begin to understand Main Street experiences and the kind of risks that are part of this process. So I'm going to turn it over to Martin and look forward to hearing about your ideas, Martin.
Thank you, Walter. It was a pleasure working with you as well on those projects and with the CTA, the Culinary Tourism Alliance, and on this project as well. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to chat and to work with you guys, because I think we often think about Main Street as creating experiences, building a downtown area, and it's going to be all fine and dandy. But as we all know, and as we probably all have the experience, it doesn't necessarily go that way when you're actually on the ground and working these ideas and projects into reality. So today, what I'll be doing is I'll be looking at all these pieces, looking and then trying to understand where a Main Street often hits those barriers, hits those walls, and how we can mitigate those, and whose role it is, whose responsibilities are for each of these pieces. So we'll go through the whole thing. As Walter mentioned, I am bilingual. My first language is French, so I might be looking for my words here and there because my French is going to come out. But so if ever I'm stumbling, then Tom's going to jump in and translate for me. There you go. Please feel free to ask any questions. I don't see the chat right now in front of me because, you know, the presentation stuff, but Tom has an eye on the chat. So you can put your question in the chat. We can stop, ask questions. Please go ahead if you want to interrupt me and go with a question on your own. It's all fine. This is more of a conversation, less of me presenting than a conversation. So I do want you to get involved in this. So please interrupt me if you do have comments, examples, whatever. You can also use the comments, reactions, thumbs up, that type of stuff. That's always great. And please follow Ryerson University's Main Street and Reimagined project. I think it's a great project, and it's giving us really hands-on tools for the future for Main Street and downtown core areas. Quick agenda. If I can press the little button, there we go. Introductions are done. We'll go into understanding the whole downtown core and the risks around it. This is not the right agenda, actually. Okay. We will go into understanding relationships behind Main Street and the community. We'll talk about the barriers. We'll also talk about mitigation of those risks to better understand. And we'll get into tips and tricks, a few examples, a few ideas. And after that, we'll have an open chat, open question period. So let's start with understanding relationship between Main Street and the community. So over the past decades, and actually more than that, we've seen a lot of these mom and pop shops, these small little rural areas, these small little stores that had so much cachet. See, my French is already coming out. So much, appeal, local appeal, and practically disappear. We're seeing a lot of this through the smaller communities across Ontario and across Canada. We've seen franchises take up a lot of space, those national retailers, the restaurants and hospitality. And we've lost kind of like that cultural identity of our business community across Canada because of these types of things, well, and much more. But I think this is one of those biggest impacts. Now, why do I talk about this? Is because it has impacted the tourism as well, that destination appeal, right? So if you go into a region or a municipality, you're expecting a local feel to it, to discover that identity of that region or that municipality, which we're losing here and there. But we are also seeing a rise of visitor interest for these smaller destinations across Canada and across internationally. So that's great to see. The cities per se, people, well, especially with the pandemic, what we've also seen is that people want to stay local, right? They want to stay in their own little regional area. They want to discover, and they've been discovering tons over the past 2 years. So when you're looking at, I won't go into the pandemic and all these, the trends around it, but what we've actually seen is that people are out there discovering their own backyard, basically. So the time is really right now to understand what's going on your own main street, in your own community, to figure out, okay, well, how do I attract people? And if I do attract people, how do I cater to them? And at the same time, to understand, well, as a small business owner or as a community business improvement area or chamber of commerce or whatever it is, how do I facilitate that? How do I make sure that my small businesses or my operations or the experience that I offer respond or answer to the visitor? And that's not easy to figure out. And we often see a lot of barriers pop up. And now I'm going to go through some examples, but I'm sure that you have tons of those examples out there as well. So that's basically that relationship. So we have to understand the relationship also between, here, I'll go with an example that'll be easier for me. What we've seen over the past few years is the rise of microbreweries, especially in Ontario and Quebec and other places as well, is these microbreweries, these cideries, wineries have set up shop in small towns. I live in Vankleek-Hill. So Vankleek-Hill is a very small town of 500 people between Montreal and Ottawa, like an hour between the two. And what we've seen is 12, 13 years ago, we have Beau's Brewery. So you may have heard of Beau's Brewery, one of the largest microbreweries in Canada today. But 12 years ago, they weren't there. And what we've seen is that by setting up shop here, by creating that brewery, it has revitalized the whole community. People have changed. Young families have been setting up to live here, which we weren't seeing 10 or 12 years ago because of that impact. So these types of places, we also have another town called Embrun, not too far from here, who has 2 microbreweries who had just set up on Main Street directly. And that has changed completely that Main Street. Now people are going to that Main Street and going to visit. They're attracting people in Embrun now, which was not necessarily something that they were expecting. Well, we set up a microbrewery, hopefully the local people will come. But what they've seen is that, yes, there's local, but it came a lot from the visitor area. Visitors have come out to actually try out these beers directly and locally within that space. And they've discovered the rest of the town while they were there as well. So it attracts different people. It attracts new visitors, new tourists to these small communities. And at the same time, we see that they're different in what they're expecting. There might be weekenders, day trippers going out for the day, going out on a brew tour or whatever it is. They're different in their perspective and they're different in their wants and needs as a visitor. So for a small community, you need to be aware of this, that if you're setting up a distillery in your town, on your main street, what does that mean and how can I facilitate? How can I create more experiences for those people so that they can find a way, or the main street can benefit from this new group coming in? And that's not necessarily easy to figure out. All right. So why aren't businesses building new visitor experiences on our main street? Well, the reality of small municipalities is they're basically ill-equipped. They don't have the staff. They might not have the experience. They might not even know that their town can be a destination, like a tourism space. They don't understand what it means to develop experiences. What is an experience? Is it a product? Is it a service? How do I get into that? They might not understand the visitor market as well. So who is coming to my place? Who are tourists? Why would they come? The biggest question I get when I work on projects for small municipalities, when I work on community development strategic plans, is why would people come to my place? Nobody comes, nobody visits my town. There's nothing to see, which is completely false. There's tons of things to see. You just need to emphasize those things, right, as a destination. There might not be regulations. You might have tons of regulations and procedures out there to manage startup businesses or business, but do you have the right regulations or procedures that fit with a visitor market or visitor experiences? That we do not see often. We often see gray zones, a lot of gray zones throughout that conversation with a business who wants to start an experience. I don't know what to do with this, so we'll get into that. They're often bound by insurance, risk mitigation issues, especially right now with the pandemic. I think the biggest, other than workforce, the biggest obstacle that we're seeing right now is insurance for any experience out there. The people also perceive these new experiences as risky, as too complex. It won't ever work in our small town. Those are the types of conversations I always have with tons of those businesses and municipalities when I talk to them. So all of these barriers, what they do is they hinder rural destination development. They put a lot of red flags, a lot of question marks, a lot of things we don't know, and a lot of time wasted and spent and money spent and wasted to figure these things out. So as a small municipality, you need to be aware of all these things, and a small business as well, setting up shop or whatever. You need to be aware of all of these obstacles or hurdles that you'll need to jump over as you try and set up your shop, your experience, and your product throughout any municipality across Canada. So we'll take an example. First example, I'm going to talk to you about a corn maze. So a lot of our Ontario communities have these small little corn mazes. We have one here in Vancouver called We Met Farm Adventures. And so if I ask the question, I'll try and open the floor. If people want to go and throw an idea or a question out there, let's go ahead with that. So this small corn maze is right at the border of our main street. So you can walk from Main Street, you can walk directly to the corn maze. It's great. But what would you see as the biggest barriers to set up a corn maze in a local community? Let's talk about that. Figure out the risks and the barriers around a simple corn maze. Anybody have any ideas? Oh, Mary, I can see your hand up.
I'm having tried to do something similar. It's really just the risk mitigation for the farmer or whoever's giving up their land. They have a million concerns about somebody getting hurt, them getting sued, and parking, and then all the ancillary problems of people wanting to go to the bathroom and garbage and all of that stuff. So there's many.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? I can't see everybody, Tom. So if anybody's got a question,
I'll let you know, Martin.
Okay. So Mary, absolutely, it's nuts the barriers that people or business owners have to mitigate when they just plant a corn maze, which is basically just running a field and putting tractor in there and making shapes and stuff. It's really fun. Kids love it, but when you actually start looking at all the obstacles and all the things that I need to do so that my corn maze fits with regulations in a municipality, then it's just why should I do it? Just too much work, too much hassle, especially knowing that a corn maze has a season of 2 months, a month, depending on where you're at. And you got to tons of people so that it makes sense financially and, sustainably. It just doesn't make sense. So these are just examples of things that we need to plan for corn maze. And this is just, and they might differ from one municipality to the next, and I understand that. But these are things that I've seen over the past few years that are there on the table every time that someone is trying to plan something. So you got maybe rezone. There's a lot of rezoning that has to do with an ag or commercial or like a mix of both or whatever. If the land is just agricultural, then they're not necessarily a commercial space. So you need maybe a municipal permit for a commercial space. And then you got to rezone it from ag to commercial to become a commercial space. Then you got to figure out the insurance. Okay, well, new insurance policies, what we've seen as well is insurance. As soon as something doesn't fit in a category of insurance, it become a high risk or extreme risk sport insurance. So we're talking about a corn maze here. Walking through a field, it becomes an extreme or a high risk insurance premium because people have no clue how to categorize this because the insurance company doesn't have a tourism experience category. So they'll fit it with, okay, well, it'll be, I don't know, extreme adventure or adventure thingy. They're going to try and figure it out. And more often than not, they'll fit in high risk, which increases the premiums, increases insurance prices, and puts a lot of risk on the owner. So that's one piece. Again, farm equipment, right? You've got tractors, you got all that stuff, which comes with the field, but we still have to buy those. A kind of like a welcoming infrastructure, like a booth or a kiosk, or you want to convert your farm or your barn into something that people can come in and say hi. That welcoming infrastructure, there's costs. And again, there's zoning, there's insurance, there's renovations, restructuring, it just adds up. Then you've got, if you want to sell food or drink, you need more permits for that. And what goes with those permits as well is inspections. So health unit inspections, municipal inspections, coming in, checking things out, saying, well, I don't know, your maze needs to be 1 foot wider on each side, that type of thing, right? So that it fits with regulations to run a field, which more often than not, municipality does not have. These regulations fit with other categories within their regulatory space, but maybe not for a corn maze, but they'll apply those. So keep that in mind. Harvest season, I already talked about harvest season, the shortness of a harvest season, but also the staff. Where do I find my staff for maintenance, for customer service, especially off season? For a corn maze, which starts probably in August, ends in September, hopefully October, depends on the setup. Those two months, September and October, try and find staff and students that will work the hours that you need during those 2 months. It's very difficult because they're back at school. They moved out. They especially in a rural setting, where they don't go to school locally or close to home. Have fun trying to find that staff. It's going to be very difficult. And then you got marketing, of course, promotion, and any financing, banking, lending center will require a risk assessment review. That goes with the business plan or whatever. So again, a risk assessment plan for a bank and lending center is critical if you're looking for funding for that project. So again, these are all red flags. Not all of them, but just a few red flags that I've seen and we've seen just that hinder those experiences. So this is just a small example of a corn maze, but you can apply these to any restaurant or shop, store that offers something that is different, that is unique, that's going to attract people, visitors, but also is going to put so many red flags out there that they just don't know how to manage. As much the business who's trying to set it up, than the actual municipality trying to facilitate that whole thing. Any questions or comments on this? So as someone who works within your community, either economic development officer or even a business owner or a DMO, whatever it is, you need to be aware of all these things. So it's not just because, okay, well, you just build it and people will come. It's a little bit more complex than that. Everybody has the best of intentions, and I've seen so many ideas out there, but they're often stopped or closed off because of these barriers, because of this complexity of the process behind setting up a unique experience within your municipality. There's one also that I just want to chat very quickly is, this is all the mitigation piece. We talked about all that, but how does your community actually feel about having visitors within that community? And you'll see these are stats from September, but you'll see that a lot of our communities are not even ready to have people within, like tourists or visitors, come within that municipality. They just don't feel comfortable because of the pandemic, but also because of everything else that comes around it. And these stats move, they waver. And of course, this is pandemic related, but also even without the pandemic, we often see these small communities really weary of having people from outside of the community come in and spend time, spend money, take space, whatever it is. So that's another mitigation piece that a community, a municipality needs to be aware of and has to mitigate, that community perception of what it means to have visitors within your municipality. So when you actually look at the numbers, communities near me, that's fine. People come from Ottawa or come close, like for me, from Ottawa, come close to my destination. That's not too bad. But as soon as it come from other parts of the province, from other parts of Canada and the United States and so forth and so on, they get more and more weary. So how do I make sure that I mitigate that risk? That's a huge one that a community will falter often because they don't know. What I've also seen is that communities are they're not open, but also they're not sure that they have anything to attract visitors. This is an example of a small town who decided that, okay, well, I think we have something that we can offer visitors and we'll build something around it. So I'm not sure if everybody knows where Fogo Island is. It's right off the coast of Newfoundland, eastern tip. And it's a small island. Basically, it's a small island off the northeast coast of Newfoundland. And it's basically just a fishing village, like hundreds, if not thousands, of other fishing villages out there in Newfoundland and the Maritimes and even the Pacific, who have lived and sustained themselves with fishing. But now that fishing has dried up or close to, they were too close to closing up almost the village. And it needed a few ambassadors, a few people with a vision to figure out that our town, our municipality, our island has so much more to offer. We can create a destination. We can create something that's appealing. And what they did is they built the Fogo Island Inn. So it's a huge hotel right on we'll call it a medium-sized hotel, but they've also set up a foundation so that the community is sustained by the inn and everything else around it. So everything that is supplied, the suppliers, or most of the stuff that is supplied is all local. It's all created from within town. They've taken the whole concept of creating a destination to a whole new level. So if you're really interested in figuring out or seeing a small rural destination take care of its own, check out Fogo Island. I think it's really interesting as a study, case study. And it goes back to that concept of having a vision. So how can my community be more open to tourism development? It starts with that vision, starting with, this is not just one business or one staff member that understands tourism and wants to create an experience. It comes from that community level. So what is your community's vision for Main Street attraction, for destination development? Now, I built a lot of strategies in my day, and people want to set up, attract more visitors, attract more tourists. They just don't see that within their vision. They'll talk about very basic stuff, but it comes with that basic element of saying, okay, well, my municipality believes that tourism development is solely the responsibility of recreational, cultural, and economic developments teams. That's false. It's a vision throughout the whole municipality. The whole municipality needs to understand that a destination needs to be created through the whole group. So that means business owners, restaurant owners, everybody else, but but also within that municipality core, that staff and the council and everybody else who works within that space. They need to have that within their heads, because if they do not set that vision up right from the get-go, everything that's they'll try and set things up, they'll try and patch things up here and there, but it'll never get further than that. It needs to become almost a community vision, that they want to create a space, they want to create a destination. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. I've worked also often with economic development offices and tourism development offices and cultural and all that stuff, who have no connection whatsoever with the public works office or the council or the administration. Everybody else that works within that municipality, they think that they're isolated and they're siloed, because the other ones don't feel like it's not this isn't my issue. This is an economic development issue, and that's not true. There's so many things, so many service infrastructure, all kinds of stuff that we need to create a destination, so that everybody needs to be on board to understand that and to be aware of that. So if there's a permit that needs to be done, or a sewerage system that needs to be set up, or whatever it is, that they understand, and they all have the same vision, quite frankly. So if we go back to our list of the things that we need to think of, when you look at all those risks and barriers that we had talked about, we can do things that are pretty easy, that can help and foster and facilitate, one, the conversation, but two, also just to make things move forward. So as soon as you got a vision, a community vision that is based on developing a destination, then you can talk about having exceptions for permits for any tourism activities, cultural related activities on agricultural or commercially zoned lands. These are small things. It takes a while. I'm not saying that this is pretty easy. These are the types of things that we need to think of. These permits, you can create exceptions for these. You can also add a business category, a tourism experience or activity business category, which doesn't fit with the zoning regulations that we often see. If everybody knows what the NAICS codes are, it's government talk for codification of each type of sector. Each sector, like professional services, healthcare, social workers, they all have NAICS codes. And insurance and municipalities often use these NAICS codes to categorize every sector that they work with. And all this, it creates statistics and data that is filtered through the government and provincial and national. And this is basically what they use when they take decisions. Now, if you look at all those NAICS codes, you'll see that there is no code for tourism. There's a hospitality and restaurant, I'm guessing, food services, there we go. Food services category, which is the closest one. There's a cultural category, or arts and culture, but there is no tourism. So if you're creating a corn maze, or you're creating, a adventure walk, whatever it is, canoe trip, you're not going to fit in those codes. They're going to figure out and filter through, and municipality and insurance will say, well, maybe it fits into this, but there are no codes. So keep that in mind when they're actually building data around your municipality, especially for strategic plans. Tourism will never appear within those NAICS codes because it's not within that government setup. So when you talk about building a tourism experience or activity, those categories almost need to be created separately within your municipality to make sure that as a destination or a aspiring destination, I have categories set up and I have procedures and policies and regulations that fit with that experience or activity business. Because otherwise, I don't know where to put it. My economic development officer or my permit public works guy, whatever he is or she is, they won't be able to categorize it, and they won't be able to fit the policies with that category. So you need to create those as special or unique or different categorizations for your community. And keep that in mind that it's the same thing for insurance companies. I spoke about this earlier. So trying to figure out those insurance companies that actually promote and actually specialize in events and activity management, then just having a list doesn't need to be long, just a few insurance companies that are probably not local, right? Frankly, there are many of those small local towns that have an insurance company that can offer event insurance or activity insurance that fits with everything else that a business does. So creating a list, by point frankly, or identifying a few that you can work with, that a business say, well, I'm building a corn maze, who can insure me? Well, I've got so-and-so, and I got this company, and I got that company. Connect with those, and they'll give you a pricing that fits with that experience. Because otherwise, again, a local insurance company, they won't know the category. They'll try to fit it with another experiential activity category, and it'll probably fit with a high risk, extreme, high premium type of thing. So just as a facilitator of these projects, make sure that you have a few identified. Economic development departments and business associations. So I'm talking about chambers of commerce. I'm talking about DMOs, destination management organizations. I'm talking about marketing, RTOs, whatever they are. Those business associations need to be as useful as they can be. So clear, concise, useful information before starting a business. So starting an experience. So a business comes in and says, well, I want to build a corn maze, or I want to build a brewery. Well, that business owner knows exactly who to talk to define every step of the process, figure out exactly what they need to set up that startup. And this is not something that we often see. A municipality or business association may have a few ideas here and there, but they don't have a clear and concise list of things that a business or startup needs to do before they actually start building their experience. And what this does is that if that business owner doesn't know what hurdles that he has to jump over, then he's going to just topple over them. That's basically what he's going to do. And this creates confusion, lack of communications. It creates also a lot of frustration and costs. A lot of these businesses are putting money into different things, but they weren't aware that there was a regulation to set up a sign somewhere on Main Street. And they've just set up the sign in a way that they thought was the best. It doesn't fit with regulations. They weren't aware, and they have to replace the whole thing. I see this all the time. So those types of regulations, those types of items need to be very clear. To have a municipal policy for startups. A lot of those smaller municipalities don't even have a municipal policy for startups or procedures. Guidelines to create an experience within your municipality or community. Also, any of those support structures. Make sure that you have a list of all those support structures that are out there. There's tons out there. Your regional tourism organization has tons of support structures. Your funding and financing offices, the Community Futures Network, the banks, the BDC, and all these, they have tons of useful information. Your chambers of commerce, your BIAs, even TIA, the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, TIAC, the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, CTA, Culinary Tourism Alliance, OCC, Ontario Chamber of Commerce. All of these associations have tons of networks, and they have tons of tools and tons of support structures to help you as a community, but also your businesses develop these experiences, or develop your community as a destination. Be proactive instead of reactive. That means, I spoke about it a little earlier, but to make sure that you are not necessarily reacting every time there's something that's popping up within your business community. I need to set up a sign. I don't know, as a municipal, policy worker, whatever. I don't know what the signage policy is about. We don't have one. It hasn't been updated since 1986 type of thing. Again, be proactive. Expect that these things will appear, especially when you're building an experience. Try and figure out all of these elements and be proactive. Make sure that all this information is communicated on your website, social media, whatever it is. Have a pamphlet and make sure that clear and concise information is all found in one easy way. Communications between your local business associations and your municipalities. Some have great relationships. Some don't talk to each other at all. So that symbiosis is really, really important so that everybody's on the same page. Budget funding programs that incentivize experience and activity development that cater to visitor attractivity. So within your municipal budget, make sure that you have an experience and activity space or a tourism or a visitor, development allocation of some kind. I've seen some very progressive municipalities have a budget allocation just for experience development. So if a business owner has a great idea, they can come and connect with the municipality, and they have some funding for them. So some have, some don't, but look at that. I think that allocation needs, again, because you have a community-based vision on destination development. It starts from there. Actively participate in regional workforce recruitment, training, and talent management efforts. I write that because I spoke to it about this earlier. It's great that you all build it, but now you have to find people to work there. And right now, our reality is that the workforce isn't there. A lot of these small businesses have so much work to do to find people just to work. So be active. Figure out, okay, well, how can we get involved? How can we recruit? How can we train this new talent? Because what we've seen over the past 2 years is there's that basic exodus of workforce moving from tourism-related businesses to other areas. So a lot of our restaurant waiters, waitresses, and everybody else that worked in tourism before, they're not there anymore. They moved on. They moved on to other sectors to work. So what we're seeing right now is restaurants, hotels, experiences, whatever, adventures, they're all closing up shop, or not because of the pandemic per se, but because of the lack of workforce. So be aware of that, be aware of the stats within your area, your community, and be actively involved, because otherwise you'll have, even if you've set up the best experience or best destination in the world, if you don't have the people there to work, it doesn't really change anything, right? A few final tips and ideas. I think I'm on time, right, Tom? All right, good. A few final tips and ideas before we go into question period. Seek local help as a business owner. Your economic development, your government officials, your Chamber of Commerce representatives, they all have ideas, they all have tips, or they might not necessarily even be aware that, again, that you're working on a business, you're working on an idea, an activity. Make sure that they're aware. First things first, make sure that those people know that you're setting up something for a visitor-facing community. So that, and then ask questions. Make sure that you, even before you build anything, make sure that those people are aware, but also that they understand what you're trying to do. Because again, more often than not, we build it and we're expecting people to come. Not if an inspector comes in and then the Chamber of Commerce representative comes in and says, well, you can't do that, can't do this, da, 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 da. Make sure that they're there and seek that local help. You can also seek help from entrepreneurs. And this is one of the biggest pieces, is to look at maybe within your local area. There might be a few that have built an experience that resembles what you're trying to build. But more often than not, you might have to look at outside. Look at the other communities across Ontario, Quebec, whatever, wherever you're at, and ask questions. An entrepreneur is always ready to say, well, I did this, this, and that, and be aware of that and that. These are unique contacts and resources for you to make sure that you start mitigating all those risks right from the get-go, that you're aware of them, that you've identified them, and that you can figure out how to actually manage them when you get to that point when you're setting up shop. Build your business plan. How many times do I see businesses go off and have no business plan, no model, nothing? It doesn't need to be 15 or 20, 50 pages long. It needs to be concise. There's a great business model canvas. I often use it when I work with my students or with small businesses. It's basically a one-sheeter with little squares. So check it out, business model canvas. And there's also on the Nova Scotia Experience website, Nova Scotia Tourism Experience website, they have a experience development canvas as well, which I often use. And they've got great questions and great content. So you can fill up that business model really quickly. so that you have all of these, we're talking about risk here, but all of these ideas already set up within that business model, and then use that. This changes and this moves, as you know, but that's the first piece. Because if you haven't written it down and figured all these pieces out, then you're going to hit those walls every time. Those barriers are going to be appearing out of nowhere because you didn't plan for them. Encouraging other main street businesses to create unique, multisensory, and memorable experiences that complement each other. So your main street business partners across that town, they may have a restaurant, they may have a cafe, a bakery, whatever. Make sure that, one, they're aware of what you're trying to do, and two, try and encourage them to actually build something that is unique to your community, but is also encouraging or attractive for a visitor. It doesn't need to be much. It needs to be something that's unique and interesting, so that me as a visitor, as a tourist, I can go to that brewery, that bakery, or whatever, it's that corn maze, and I'll have other things to do during the day as well. So it won't be just a one in and one out. It'll be a whole day, maybe 2, maybe 3 days of discovery. So these smaller experiences create that hub of experiences or destination development type of stuff, so that you as a business are not alone within that destination. People are coming to see you, but they're also going to see other businesses across that space. 2 more. Build your own community's tourism value chain map. So what does that mean? So tourism value chain map is basically looking at everything that you have to offer and looking at the gaps, figuring out who are my suppliers for every tourism business out there. Where does my product come from? Where does my product go? Who are these people? These tourism value chain, and you can search it up on Google. It's pretty easy to find. But a tourism value chain map, Culinary Tourism Alliance has a culinary tourism value chain. So if you really want to focus niche on one, that's a good example. But a tourism value chain map will give you an idea, a sense of where your community is at, who does what, and also what are visitors expecting and looking for. So this will just give you an idea of, okay, well, if we're missing, I don't know, a small adventure, I don't know, an outdoor a rafting or canoeing experience you're on a river or a lake, but you're missing that canoe experience, that canoe trip. Who do I need? I need a supplier of canoes. Can I get a supplier of canoe? Can somebody actually create an activity? These are kind of like your tourism value chain maps. I do often these types of tourism value chain just to give an idea of the customer flow of your clients when they come in, the visitor flow of people, what they see, what they're expecting, who they've seen, where do they go. There's tons of tools out there that you definitely work with to figure this out. And just a quick risks and barriers checklist. As we've done with the corn maze, basically understanding those gaps and those limitations that are very specific to developing experiences, and go through that checklist. Okay, this is done, this is done, this is done. This is going to help you figure out, okay, well, where are those issues? Where are those barriers that I'm expecting to hit? And make sure that you identify them. There we go. Any questions or comments?
Oh, Walter, you're on mute just there. I'll just say, Martin, thank you so much. That was fascinating, and I'd like to open the floor to questions. I mean, so if anyone would like to type their question, I'd be happy to read it on your behalf. But of course, come off mute and talk away.
Tom, can I just quickly react as people are getting their questions ready? Thank you, Martin. That was great. Very practical. One of the lessons I was getting out of your presentation is the idea of, is your community, is your Main Street ready?
Yeah.
Or for this, before you even start to encourage it, do you have the necessary pieces? Thought you did a great job of identifying those. Can I just say, profit and nonprofits, right? You could have a nonprofit or social enterprise that has to follow the same rules to some extent, right? They have to make sure that that's the case or not. Yep. One of the things I like to do is to think about the fact that when we're advising, supporting an enterprise of one kind or another, that we have a significant responsibility, that we're encouraging people in the private sector to invest their money in something. And I think that the kind of cautions that Martin was raising are important, as we're encouraging that we might get very optimistic about the coffee shop, but have we done our homework, we, the Main Street community, done our homework to ensure that there aren't significant barriers and that there is a market for this? I mean, many of the things that we talk about have quite a high level of risk. We know that restaurants fail quite often. And it's not just the loss of the investment on the part of the entrepreneur, but what it does to their spirit and their feeling of optimism. But it also reflects badly on the Main Street eventually, that when these things happen. So I think it's the realism that I thought, Martin, you did a great job of being very realistic about what we encourage and what kinds of things can we do to mitigate the risk. So I thought you did a great job in doing that. Tom, I just wanted to add some comments. Yep. I thought were just backing up what Martin did.
Well, I was a director of a DMO in the past, right? I was a destination marketing organization. And we had, like I said, I mean, we had these tons of ideas and people wanted to do this and that, and this is great and everything, but they haven't figured all of this risk mitigation piece out yet. And that was basically the barrier to create that destination. So as a DMO director, which is trying to market the actual destination, then for me, of course, to have more experiences and great unique stuff, then absolutely fantastic. But when people will come in and say, well, I can't do a corn maze because I'm going to get hit by this, and so, and that was frustrating as much for them, that business owner, than for me as a DMO who wanted to attract and to get these unique experiences on the floor and to market them. They just weren't ready. They just didn't know. So I spent most of my time just on awareness to explain to them what is a visitor market, how do tourists, why would you be a destination? Why would people come to that type of stuff, right? Yeah. So it's very basic information.
I'd like to ask a question, and it's about hearing all the risks. It's like starting any small business, but all I hear are dollar signs, like each thing, bringing more people to the table, getting through all the red tape. So how do you suggest estimating that?
Estimating the cost?
The additional cost for mitigating all these risks. Like, okay, you have a business plan and an idea and then what percentage do you put on top? Or is that how you do it?
Not necessarily, because you have to plan, and this should be part of your business plan, those risks. That risk mitigation piece. What I've often seen is that if you've built your business plan and figured out the risks beforehand, it'll cost you much less than when you're in and you have no business plan and you're hitting those walls every time. Because more often than not, those costs were already inferred. You already spent money on signage or on this thing or so info, and they don't fit with regulations. So you have to start over. So what I often tell people is just figure it out right away. Be very transparent. Figure it out. Okay, well, what are my risks? And put it in your budget, because otherwise, and most often than not, people say, well, it's going to cost me more than what I was expecting. Okay, well, how do I figure it out? How do I facilitate? Are there tools? Are there funding bodies out there that will help you in those pieces and and there are a lot of them. A lot of those funding models, they can be more often than not, they're loan programs or whatever. But it's just to be aware. I think that piece, that to be aware of those risks, that needs to be at the forefront, even before you start building something. Because otherwise, it's going to cost you much more if you don't expect them, you haven't planned for them. Does that answer your question?
A little. It's hard when you're launching something new, to be aware of the risks is impossible because you've never done it before. So you'd have to hire a consultant, and then like to plan for everything that's going to happen is probably impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was saying, that try and find other entrepreneurs who have done the same thing as you did elsewhere. US, Canada, Ontario, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to know exactly the regulations within that local community. You want to know what are the risks. When you set up shop, what barriers did you hit? Did you see, and you can find these people pretty quickly on LinkedIn and Facebook today, but and they're often, more often than not, eager to inform you. So those, like I said, I mean, those are your resources that can help you figure out, okay, well, and some you just can't plan for. I absolutely agree. Some things will be out of left, like a pandemic. Who would have expected to have a pandemic 3 years ago and that everything would be closed down? Nobody. But these are the types of things that those people, they've had the experience of building that experience, or that they're setting up shop or whatever, and they can maybe give you a few pointers. So more often than not, your network is going to help you out. Mary, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I can just add, if I may, Martin, that one of the good things that you can do is also just start small, and scale up. Whatever you plan to do, if it's possible to do, a small version, a test kind of beta of it, and then scale up, that will really help you to mitigate your risks and to see, the things that you might not have even thought of before they're massive, and be able to deal with them. The other thing I will say is that, there is always going to be, when you're enthusiastic to do something and you shop your idea around, and you're often going to get people who want to add value. They really do want to support it, but their only way they know to add value is to catastrophize around all the things that could possibly go wrong, because we are all kind of predisposed that way, right? So I would just say, don't let those people take the wind out of your sails. But I would also say, listen carefully. If you can not let it get you down, but take the nugget of whatever they're saying, there's often a good potential flag in there. That's Absolutely. All I have to add.
Thank you, Mary. Any other questions, comments, examples?
Martin, can I just follow up on Mary's comment that we also have to be aware of government and other government agencies that are encouraging certain kinds of things.
Yeah.
My experience when I was doing Main Streets in Alberta were that the Alberta government came out and gave every community a certain amount of money to develop a tourism attraction without any of the kind of analysis that you've been talking about. And so communities went in and used that money at times that 2 years later, 3 years later, things had disappeared. So it's always important to get behind what's going on. I mean, is there really an understanding that if we give you 3 million loan, grant, whatever it happens to be, is it based on sound business? And so I always, beware of the person coming to give you this. What's behind this in terms of exposing you? Because once this is done, what we found in follow-up work through our research was that when you had this kind of program in place and it failed, it was very difficult to get out of this. That communities then were burnt and said, we're not going to try this again because, we tried and look what happened to us. So it's always that caution of, with money, what's behind it? Is it that the bureaucrats' KPIs are just to give the money out, as opposed to making sure that this loan or grant truly makes sense? And so that's that, again, that caution that we always should have when we see these kind of grant programs, especially if you're using other people's money, which is what we're doing.
And our system is set up so that we have tons of funding out there for planning, like strategic plans and feasibility studies, but not much going on for implementation. And more often than not, again, these businesses have a business plan, or they've had funding to create a strategy of some kind, or even municipalities or projects, whatever it is, but they have no clue how to implement. They have no options, no funding, nothing. And the plan just sits on a shelf, and it rots there. That implementation piece, I think, and this is why we're talking about risk management and Main Street is so important, because that implementation piece is often the piece that is missing when we're actually building these destinations. So that as well, I mean, and quite frankly, I'd love to tell you, well, there's tons of solutions out there. I know, like in our organization, locality, that's what we do. We help on the implementation side. But keep that again in mind. The business might have a strategy, might have something that's great written on paper, or even a community. I've worked on a few lately, but will they actually be implemented? It's hard to say because the funding's not there.
Yeah. Again, can I just go back, Tom, to Mary's point, which I thought was really important, is this, I mean, the jargon now is tactical, right? That, you know, if you're going to build a coffee shop, that maybe you do a pop-up for a while to see, you know, what are people looking for? Or if you're thinking about building a patio, do you go and build a patio, or do you use your sidewalk creatively for a summer to see if it actually works? That whole aspect, again, of minimizing the risk, so that you don't want to go through the whole concept to find out there is no market for what you're looking for, or what are the issues. And so that caution that I think Mary was, it was very good that you brought this up, was this idea of short steps. And that's where the pop-up, try out, paint the sidewalk, as opposed to building the deck, all that kind of stuff. If you're thinking about a tour, like you were saying, can you do it on a shoestring, just try it out, you know, not go through the whole investment cycle. But there's a lot of stuff on Main Street you can do that way. And with the vacancy rates now that we have in many of the main streets, there's lots of places where you can test out your concept before you actually, you know, sign a long-term lease and do the capital improvement. So I thought that was a really important factor.
And I'm just going to add in there as well, is you can evaluate the risks around it too. Because if like, just for me, for instance, you're setting up a patio, then there's tons of other things that need. Does your Main Street even have a Main Street policy for patios? Are you allowed to actually set up a table on that Main Street sidewalk or whatever it is? These are the types of hurdles that you'll figure out if you're not going full in, but you're testing things out. I think that's a great example, Walter, of going very, very baby steps.
I had a question, Martin, about so in our conversations with business improvement areas and similar organizations for a while, it seems to be a bit of a choice that many BIAs seem to make. And, you know, one choice is, let's spend our time and resources in us ourselves putting on a festival, you know, creating some kind of attraction that way and bring people involved in that. And then another way is to say that we ourselves are not going to put on a festival or a big event, but we're going to encourage, facilitate, work with other people to do that. And I guess listening to your presentation, I mean, your ideas and your processes kind of more align with that, you know, let's help other people do stuff. Yeah. And I guess, you know, do you have any thoughts or expansion on that idea of, you know, advice for a BIA or a similar type of organization, you know, in terms of where to spend the resources, time and energy and money? Do you think it's better to kind of work with other people to help and leverage what you can do so that they can do their own things and kind of spread animation around? Or, you know, is there advantage to doing a big one-off type festival? I wonder if that's something you could talk to a little bit.
I think it's the role of municipal or associations should be focused on fostering, facilitating, making sure that if someone has an idea for something, a festival, an event, whatever, that it can be implemented. And it's switching that negativity, and it goes back to echoing what Mary and people are saying, switching that negative perception to a positive and saying, well, these are the barriers that exist, but here's something that you can do for those barriers, and we'll figure it out together. And I think that communications element is often lacking within small municipalities. You can't do that because of so. Instead of saying, well, no, we can't do that because we've never had precedence around that, but we'll figure it out. We'll make it happen, type of thing. Just that communications piece, that messaging can change everything. And that goes back to that vision element, right? If your municipal council, your staff all have the same vision of saying, we want to create a destination out of all this stuff, then that mindset is already set. You're setting that up very up at the high end so that every other idea or decision is taken all based, it's supposed to be based on that vision, right? We want to create the best small destination in rural Ontario, or we want to be the best outdoor. It could be anything on the vision side, but it needs to be there, because otherwise municipal council have no clue. And also those EDO officers, those Chamber of Commerce BIAs, they're saying, well, okay, well, I can help you out, but there's so many barriers. I don't even know how to manage these. I think that positive messaging needs to be so in tune, it needs to be out there.
Thanks. Louise.
Oh, there we go.
I just had a question, Martin, who knows our challenges very well. I'm the co-president of our business association here, and we have a population of about 1,800. Something that we're working on is an economic development initiative to actually assist people wanting to start a new business, because sometimes our experience is someone comes here with a great idea, and we see a store has been rented, we talk, we see they're open, and then, someone's in there and they haven't really spoken to any of us. They haven't had the opportunity to, find resources or even know, where to order a sign, or that they need a sign permit. So we're trying to create, we surveyed a lot of the local businesses, and that was a big response, that we needed like a resource place to go. I'm looking for a house, or I'm looking for a sign, or who can redo my floors, what permits do you need, and to know what's, to have some relevance and know what's going on in the community. And at the same time, we're taking on more events because insurance issues with volunteer groups. And so, we all ask ourselves a key question. I've spoken to Martin about this before, is, whose job is it? I attend conferences and they say, oh, we have all these business resources. Our municipality has business resources. The counties have business resources. We're volunteers trying to help businesses. And as you say, we all have our own business experience, but beyond that, you don't want to misguide anyone, or, so I'm just wondering, Martin, what, as we move forward with our initiative, which is to form an investment group. Example, one of the problems we face is, everybody in town has a million different kinds of store hours, and some of them say they just need more money to pay staff. It's like a chicken and egg. Yeah. People are here, the stores are not open, but the stores are not open, people don't come back. Right. Anyway, Martin, over to you.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on each municipal structure and region, but more often than not, what I've seen is if you've got a business association, it's easier for the businesses and the industry to foster and facilitate, because they understand, they're in the weeds, they understand that what a business is going through. More often than not, it's the communication between the two, municipal, the regional, and the BIA that's lacking, and it's just too complex. Who do I talk to? Like here in Prescott and Russell, where we live, me and Louise, there's so much out there. All of the funding and all of the not regulations, but the structure is there, right? There's so many tools out there. It's just to figure out, where do I go? Who do I talk to? How do I get this moving forward? And who can actually help me?
That's right.
And I think that's the biggest issue is that experience piece. Who is ready in my municipality that can really help me and not just send me into another direction? And I think that's one of the biggest issues across most of our small municipalities in Ontario, well, across Canada, is that there's so much turnaround, there's volunteers, there's new staff, inexperienced staff that just doesn't know. I don't know. If you don't, if you can't help if you don't know. So that's something that needs to be addressed. And to have something that's almost permanent, right? Well, of course it needs to be kept up to date, but almost a repository of every regulation, every rule. And that's what I was saying, that to not focus on what the municipality is saying, of saying, well, our industry, I don't know, as a restaurant owner, you would fit in this category. So these are all the policies that you need to follow. Be creative within your categories. So if Bose decides to do, I don't know, or even a restaurant in our town decides to do a cultural event, I don't know, whatever.
A labyrinth, a thing, a meditation walk, it doesn't fit anywhere. And they spend all their time fighting with the building, the bylaw department, the planning department.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's because the building department probably doesn't even know that. Okay, well, in town so-and-so in Western Ontario, they've figured this piece out and they've done this, this, and that. And that's where we're missing as well, is we're staying local. We're staying in our own little mishmash of ideas. And more often than not, all of these things that we've been talking about
I've already been done somewhere successfully.
Right. Exactly. It's just to be aware. I'm not even aware of this, and to do that research. Yeah. And not just put up the beer and say, well, we can't do that because policy X doesn't let us do it, type of thing, you know.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if it answers your question.
A bit.
Okay.
Does anyone have any more questions or comments they'd like to share? Walter, is there anything else you wanted to? All right. Well, maybe I'll tie it up there and say, you know, Martin, thank you so much for your time and insights there. It was really useful and interesting, and you know, like for me, just to see some of those like practical steps that, you know, a BIA type organization could follow, and you know, it was great. So thank you for that.
Pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
And perhaps Martin, you want to drop in your email or your connections into the chat, so that if people want to connect with you one way or another, that, you know, they know where to find you.
Yeah, I can do that now. Thank you everyone for actually participating. And if you have any questions, please send me an email, call me, whatever it is, and we'll chat about it. Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thanks. And just a reminder to everyone, our newsletter is here. If you haven't signed up, there's the link. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another session. Take care.